Welcome to the London Photo Festival podcast. As part of our Art and Business of You series with Beth Taubner, the final element of our podcast is to review the work of two photographers via video link. Conducting a portfolio via video is a first for all three of us, but we are trying this new approach given the unusual circumstances we currently find ourselves in. Welcome back to the show, Beth.
Hi, Emma. I'm so pleased to be here as always, and it's great to be doing these portfolio reviews as the final kind of communications from this progressive series that we've been working on for visual artists, for photographers. And one reason we decided to do the portfolio reviews is because you, as the person who's kind of with Kit, come up with the London Photo Festival, and you are a person who curates shows and hangs shows and exhibitions. So you have a lot of insight into photographers and what makes a good photograph, what makes a good story in a photograph. In my own background, I've done a lot of portfolio reviews over the years, both in the US, UK, Germany, Italy, other places. I've reviewed for the Palm Springs Photo Festival, which is it's in Palm Springs and in New York, and it's a very, very prestigious photo festival with a lot of focus on reviews. For the AOP in London, the photography show, the Art Directors Club in New York, and the two major photo organizations in the US, ASMP and APA. So I've looked at a lot of portfolios, plus I've done a lot of assigning. So I'm excited to be working with our photographers who've been listening to the series, and in particular with our guest today.
And just for those people who are listening on Podbean and iTunes, we'll be displaying the images that we're reviewing today on our YouTube channels, blog and Facebook pages. So the 30-minute review is going to consist of two parts. Part one, we'll find out a little bit more about the photographer. And then part two, you and I will review the images submitted by the photographer. So welcome to you, Maureen. It's really lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I think it's an amazing opportunity for me to have a review from two super qualified professionals in the United States and London as well.
Right, thank you.
What's your whole name?
My name is Marine Fontana. I'm a Belgian, Brazilian, Italian photographer, and I'm based in Florida, United States.
Okay. So tell us a bit about yourself and your background.
So I was an event photographer for 17 years, working most of the time in Europe. And yeah.
Let's go back a little bit. Where were you born and raised? Let's start.
Sure. I was born and raised in Brazil, but I as well studied and lived in Belgium and Italy.
And was your family, so your family is, what's the background of your family?
So my parents are Belgian and they moved on the 60s to Brazil. We had a business in Brazil, and I was born and raised in Brazil by a Belgian family. And I studied and lived there for 27 years. I moved to do a post-graduation in marketing in Belgium. And in Belgium, I lived 4 years. I was hired by Coca-Cola. I worked for Coca-Cola in Belgium and in Brazil. But I think my passion was always photography. So in parallel of my work as a product manager and later on in advertising was photography. And I start to study in parallel with marketing photography.
That's great. So how many languages do you speak? Just curious.
So my mother tongues were Portuguese and French, and then Italian and English. And I have a knowledge of Spanish living in Florida.
Wow.
It's amazing to be multilingual like that. And then it can inform your work as well.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of different influences.
Right. Well, we're going to get to that in our question.
Yeah.
So what led you to photography? Why did you
I'm
have
sorry.
a
Can you rephrase?
why do you have a passion for photography? What led you to photography?
Probably, I mean, I'm a very visual person, and I probably, through my lenses, I can imagine looking for some seascapes or landscapes or people. I have a really a little storyteller on my mind, and so the camera is something that is properly. It's as I wrote on my artistic statement, is the extension of my body, and it's so natural to me to see through my camera that sometimes is stronger than myself. I have always a camera on my hand, and I spend hours researching, making different experimentations. And so probably you have seen on my work that I'm very attracted to light. And I work very much with the ICM technique. So intentional camera movement is one of the techniques that I feel more attracted in this moment. But I work already double exposure in camera, in this specific project that we will discuss, underwater shooting, and I'm starting with drones.
Okay, I want to take you off that for a moment because you're talking about technical things.
You're right.
And in my experience, photographers like to lead with the technical. And for the audience, that doesn't matter at all. The audience.
I heard on your podcast.
All right, so I'm repeating myself but the audience only wants the experience. It's a visceral response for them. They don't care what your technique is. The technique is there to support the storytelling. So it's really important when the question was what led you to photography. It's not about what the technical aspect of your work is. So you're very visual, and you were working in marketing, and somehow you kind of went down the road to becoming more professionally geared into the visual part of yourself. So I'm always curious as to, what was the call? What was the call that made you make the break to be a full-time photographer? Just in one or two sentences.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question that you're making. It's a natural evolution on my life. I think marketing was a very interesting tool in my life, but it was a too rigid tool for someone that it's natural, very creative. I was raised on a family very into art, and I travel very much with my family, especially in Europe. And as I heard as well in your podcast, we were as well raised on a family very much where the values of art were very important. And so I was surrounded as well myself very much by art and by the influence of certain movements. And in particular, if I can mention, the Impressionism movement is something that is very present on my work.
Okay, that's great. Because we're going to talk more about your influences, but because you're not a starting out photographer, you have had a big life. And so that informs the work. That's true for all of us, right? We're not, and I think that's really interesting as people evolve, where you say marketing was too rigid. Marketing is having a marketing background is great because it can support you in getting your work seen, because you have that information in your, but to understand that in your roots you come from a very creative background and you're very creative, then that's a different way of approaching the world. It's using a different part of your brain. So that's fantastic.
Interesting.
Okay, over to you, Emma.
Yeah, so I just wondered if you could perhaps in sort of 3 sentences explain a little bit more about your work, your attributes, your goals, your photography.
Okay, so my goals in this portfolio review, I think it's something that happens with so many photographers, that we adore, we like so many things, and we lose ourselves sometimes. And it was very interesting. I listened several times the podcast that you did, ladies, and it was interesting to. I lost myself. It was interesting to see that we need to have some patterns on our work. We need to have some codes that you can identify the work of someone and to say, this is David Hockney. This is, I don't know, someone else. And I think looking to my work, I experiment so many things, but I don't have an identity. And what is missing on my work is identity, that someone can see my work and say, oh, this is Marine Fontana. It cannot be someone else. And my other question for you ladies is the following. On our artistic process, we are always evolving, as you mentioned in the beginning of this podcast. And it's part of the process to experiment different things, to experiment different techniques and feelings and whatever. And how can I make my experience and not lose my identity?
Okay, that's a good question, but let's roll back to Emma's actual question. And the question is, what would be one or two sentences, or you remember we've been talking about attributes in the podcast series. What do you think are some of the attributes of your work, not just this series? Right? Yeah. So attributes being traits or characteristics. Because ideally, what we want is to understand how the attributes apply to any work that you do, whether it's the series we're going to look at today or another project that you work on. That's what all of us want. That's what it means to be able to develop a brand voice. So play back to us a little bit, just briefly, a few words or a couple of sentences of what overall you feel your work is about, not just this series.
Okay, talking about attributes, talking about my personal attributes, I think I'm a very feminine person. So, but not, I will say a simple feminine person that is not.
Did you say simple?
A simple way to be feminine. So not with laces and paillettes, let's say in this way. I'm very sensitive. I think I'm very creative person as well. I'm an extrovert person, but as well in the same time a little bit shy. So I don't I don't like to have the spotlights over me. I want to be on a backstage doing my work in silence.
Very common. You know, this is, I find with most artists that I work with, you know, they always have to go home and recharge. You know, it's actually an introvert personality, because the introvert can go out for periods of time and connect, but then they always have to recede so that they can recharge and integrate. So I think that is the creative personality, in fact. All right, well, that's great.
So yes, one last question, shall we, before we go on to review, because we've got a time limit. So just very briefly, could you just let us know who are your influences, or what are your influences?
I mentioned to you ladies, I think one major influence in my work is David Hockney. I'm absolutely in love with his work, his creativity, the dimension of his work. So I have been following his work in the last 20, 30 years. And I admire him very much. So for example, as well on collage, I was inspired by him to create my own collage. And when I developed this this homemade project here, playing in my backyard, looking through my camera, I was seeing David Hockney's swimming pools in California, the movement of the water, the reflex of the water, the swimmers. And so he's my major element of influence.
So this might be a good time to bring up your images. Shall we do that?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
One thing you talked about, Maureen, was the color when you wrote to us. And so you can see that even in looking at you, you know, there's the yellow, the green behind you. And
yes.
You know, so these are very Hockney-esque.
Vibrant.
Yes, vibrant. There you go. That's an attribute. Let's have just a little excitement about that word. Vibrant is an attribute that's it conjures up a feeling that is visual, right? Vibrant feels alive. It feels, I would say, full of life.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So can I just check that you both ladies, you can see the PDF?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Shall we move on to the first image?
Sure.
There we go. There we are.
So we're going to talk about, we've edited your portfolio down, Maureen, to the images that we want to discuss with you today. And one thing that I really respond to in this first image is that these are real women. And I feel excited by that. You haven't turned them into sylph-like models. They have real women's bodies. And so for me, in a way, they stand for all women. And that is in alignment with your idea of the simple feminine. I think that's very positive. The color, I like.
Yeah, you were talking about Hockney's color. This is a very nice balance of color.
And for example, in this image in particular, they are crossing two ladies, but each one has a different swimming cap in different colors. That's, for me, is the symbol of different personalities. Yes, there is harmony, but they are two different persons with two different personalities as well.
Right, but again, we don't know that. I'm going to keep stressing that to you because you don't have the opportunity to communicate that when someone is looking at your work. The work has to be visceral and understood, you know, kind of from the heart and the brain in the story that someone will extract from the work. Even if there's an artist, even if you're in a gallery with the show and there's an artist statement, people don't really digest the artist statement. They read it and then it's kind of a little bit of a blah, blah, blah. And then they go along and they see what are their feelings about the work and how does it move them. So what I do like about this project, and it's what I'm going to talk about as we go through, is this idea of point, counterpoint, where some of the images are more active and some of the images are more still. And that starts to create a visual tension in how the work is edited. And that is something that I would want you to continue to think about as you expand this project, so that it feels anchored, but then there's this movement and vibrancy around it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Very interesting analysis.
Because I think you said in your introduction originally that you did a bit of wedding photography as well.
Yes, I did for 17 years a high-end wedding destination photography in Europe, in several countries. Yes.
So it would be the same when you did wedding photography. So you would, you know, there's a start point, a middle, and an end. There's a story that goes throughout the wedding photography. It would be the same in a personal project.
I love this parallel.
Yes, this is something that Emma and I talked about in your work, because you understand something about narrative, but we have to think about that in terms of this project that you submit, not your commissioned work, because that's not what we're here to discuss today.
Sure.
Now, so I think let's can we move on to the next
We can move
picture?
on to the next one. Yep, no problem.
Okay. Now, what starts to happen in this image is a sense of deconstruction in the image itself, because it becomes more painterly. And this is where we start to understand where your influences are playing out in the work that you're doing. But this deconstruction of her leg and the movement of the bathing suit. So again, it's real women. We haven't identified them. We're not looking at their faces. We can project ourselves into this. Emma can, I can. We've been there, you know, we've been in the pool in our one-piece bathing suit. And that was a little joke. And I feel that even though, you know, they're clearly women with real women's bodies, it's not so literal. And that is a positive. This is part of the point counterpoint, right? So that we have a sense of movement and a little bit of mystery, which we'll talk about a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real sense of movement. I think you get that with her ponytail, and then with the reflection of the bathing suit just underneath it. And it kind of draws your eye. And because she's countered by her leg, isn't she, on the left? So that I get that kind of sense of movement off to the right.
It's refracted in the water, and that sense of that's part of what makes it painterly. That's
Exactly.
where the reflection of the red suit in the water, and it's vibrant. Again, it's moving, it's alive. And so that's a word that I would say is very, very important for you to think about: alive, as opposed to just vibrancy. Then you start to move into a bigger idea about what the attribute is.
Very interesting. I mean, I would like just to add that in this, my research to overlap photography and painting. I use in this collection for the first time as well oil painting filter to bring this nostalgia.
No technical.
Okay.
Let's know how you got there. We want to experience the image, because this is something, you know, you want to take out of your gene, in a sense, not your jeans that you're wearing, your gene, Gene. It's very critical that you do not lead with the technical or explain your work from that perspective. If you're influenced by painting and you research that, that's fantastic. We're thrilled. But don't please, you have to excise that from your discussion of your work. That's
Okay.
Shall we move? Right, we've got a few minutes, so let's go to number page 3, which is the two ladies together.
So here, Emma, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the thing that struck me was the use of negative space in this, and I wondered if you'd done that intentionally.
Absolutely. I love this. I do very often this kind of construction. I think it's more, I think in this visual side that I have, the geometry, like the previous image and this image, are very important for me. And the space that I keep is because I think it's more elegant, it's more balanced, and it's not so common.
What about, we do notice that you tend not to center the person in the image. And so this negative space on the side of this image is also part of this dynamic space that you like?
Yes, I center on the left or right my image, but I mean, I think I'm not the only one. I think what it's interesting is the space that I keep on the top of my image.
Okay, because we'll talk a little bit more about this spacing left to right. What is nice is here's where you see, this is the point from the the counterpoint from the point. It's still, they are like swans. They're, you know, their necks are kind of wrapped around each other. I wonder, and I feel that if you are ever going to, you know, show this work, I would like you to do just a little bit of retouching to kind of clean up the bathing suit a bit. I think that would be important.
Okay. The drops, the water drops, or what?
You know, where you see the creases on her bathing suit, I think it could just be cleaned up just slightly. That's just a note to you.
Okay, great. Excellent.
So let's move on.
Okay, so the next one is the underwater shots.
This is a very strong image.
Mm.
This image is where we really start to really engage with the mystery of what is going on in your thinking. You know, that the shape of her body feels so unusual. Her hand is dissolving in the water. It's, you know, it is so painterly, but for me, from an attribute perspective, it's where I feel that the mystery
Yeah.
of what you're trying to talk about here, where we're in a little bit of a dreamscape, but not so literal, a dreamscape or a dream world, or how we see things in our dreams. So this, for me, I felt and have said to Emma all along, this is a really important image for me in understanding the potential of the project. What do you think, Emma?
Yeah, they start to become very ethereal, don't they, these images? And I think before we probably hadn't had a sense of that really. Perhaps the ones with the two women moving, but this one, I think this is where it starts to develop a bit more interest.
Yes, because there's like one world above the water.
That's right.
The world beneath the water. And was that your intention?
Absolutely. I mean, I work on the surface of the water, on the borders of the water, and underwater. So this is not the first time that I'm shooting underwater, but it's the first time that I use ballerinas to underwater. And I was trying to ask them to dance in front of my camera underwater, and to have what I love is this, her legs and hands, the movement that you see inside of the water. This is as well a way to paint light. And I love this, the textures that I got from this image, and the following one that we will see the reflex on the border.
Okay,
let's go to that, yeah, because we've got 5 minutes left on here.
This one is very, very strong. You know, the thrusting of the bodies, the reflection above them, the shapes. These are probably the two strongest images in the series.
Yeah.
You know, the color of the bathing cap and the suit coming so strongly out of this kind of ethereal space. We feel transported.
Yeah, this is a strong sense of movement, isn't there, in these?
I feel very attracted by the reflex on the border. So I'm always searching for this double image, this double personality that comes out from the reflection of people.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, Emma, over to you.
Yeah, so this one, I mean, the use of color in here is very strong. The background for me is slightly distracting.
Okay.
And I wondered if we go back again then, don't we, to the outside world, and I wonder if this should perhaps feature in a bit in the beginning of the story, where everybody's at the front on the top, and then you come down into this underworld.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Another issue which we both were concerned about is that frequently the horizontal line of the image is not straight.
Not, yeah.
And that's something that you have to be more meticulous about.
Okay, great, interesting.
Sometimes your line is like this.
It's slightly out, yeah.
And so if it were really on an angle, then it would seem intentional, but you know, it can seem a little bit like sloppy, honestly. So
excellent. I will take more attention to this. This are the feedbacks that I'm expecting from you, and that I will be more attentive on my post-production.
Right, your post-production, and also when you're shooting.
Okay.
Did you have anything else to say, Beth, about this one? Shall we move on?
This for me is really problematic, I have to say.
Oh.
There's no focal point. There's no focal point in the image, and it seems disconnected from the rest of the project.
Yeah, a slight inconsistency, I think, to the others, because the others have got this nice, as you say, kind of painterly feel, and this one not so much.
So I was making an experience here. I reduced the speed of my camera. I want to grab the movement of the two ladies that will jump then in the swimming pool. You're absolutely right. Even in terms of light and style, it's different from the rest of the collection. And probably if we need to present as a collection, this probably cannot be integrated. But I mean, it's part of my experience in this project.
Yeah. But your experience in the project and editing the project are two different things.
Yeah.
You know, the thing about editing is being able to let go. And if this is something that you want to explore, maybe you explore it in another project, or you find a way to bridge, you know, to go back and shoot more for this project and find a way to bridge this idea. But this, whereas the other images are more graceful, not seeing the feet, you need a focal point somewhere. You know, it's important for us to talk about what's not working as much as we're talking about what is working, because you have the essence of a very strong project that you could build out on. You know, one thing when Emma said about your wedding photography, and so, you know, it starts where we see the bride getting ready, and then, you know, there's the ceremony, and then there's the cutting of the cake and the first dance and all of that kind of stuff. There's a narrative. So you do have a narrative, and it has to be edited so that the narrative is clear. And that's a very important piece of advice that we're giving you in terms of, because I would like you to see you continue this project. And it doesn't mean that they have to be the same women in the same bathing suits. It could be the same women in different bathing suits, where you explore, now that we've identified some of your attributes, where you work more to the attributes and you're more mindful of the details.
Yeah. And plus you could perhaps use some influences from the Art Deco, because it's very Art Deco, I think, throughout these images.
Great, love it, this parallel.
You could use the Art Deco shapes and, you know, shadows from the buildings you get not far from where you live. So.
More consciously, I would say that's what this one is. Again, going back to the counterpoint. So if what's happening on land, which is how we have kind of read it, Emma and I, that what's happening on land has more of a sense of reality, but we don't want to be involved in these women's faces. And you'll see that we have edited out that work, you know, so that again, we have to be able to project ourselves into it. And this is the Art Deco aspect of it. And that's old. And then when we come, as we start to enter the water, things start to deconstruct. And then when we're underwater, it's very deconstructive. And that is the arc of the story. That is the arc of the project. And from our point of view, that would be a good way for you to edit the work. As you can see, we haven't put it in order for you, but that is how we have edited your presentation.
Yeah. And then you spoke about your attributes, and you said you were feminine, and I think this is a very feminine shot. And I'm slightly distracted by your cropping though, because there's a very tight cropping of the hand on the left-hand side, and also the lady on the left on the right, and the lady on the left is not in the same angle as the right hand, and I think that would have been quite powerful to have had them straight, you know, not head on, but back on.
It's more meticulous for sure. And here's a place also where you see that the edge of the pool is not straight.
Yeah.
So these are the little details that will make the work better, that will give the work more authority.
Okay, we need to wrap up. So these are the last two images.
We feel do not belong in the project. needs to be like another beginning of another story, something technical that you're experimenting with. It doesn't have the grace and kind of intentionality of some of the other work.
Okay.
Emma.
And the next one is this one.
This again, I have very strong feelings about this not being part of the project. This seems like a beauty shot to me, which may be you, but in this world of being transported, it is much too literal, and I get really hung up on her mascara or whatever is going on with eyelashes. And you know, you've created a world of mystery, and then this doesn't really have a place. And it doesn't mean you can't do it in another project.
Yeah.
But in this project, from my point of view, it's not part of this project.
Excellent. Excellent feedback, ladies. I really enjoy the fact to receive this feedback. There is certain things that I haven't noticed. For example, the line super straight of my swimming pool, as you mentioned. And I had doubts about language, that I noticed that I had some elements that are very different in my collection. And now, hearing from you, I will see in another way my project.
Good, because we want to encourage you
to
continue on with this project so that it is a project, not a collection, so that you bring a more rounded world. You can do 4, 5, 6 other shoots where you can then figure out where you would have enough for an exhibition or something like that. So that this is the beginning, and there's more exploration to be done. So when you go to the YouTube channel and you take notes about what we've been talking about, you will be able to have some real direction and how to move forward and to think about your attributes. And that's what we wanted to enable you to do, because what we've been talking very much from an attribute perspective. So with all of my clients, this is how they work. And then when you have the attributes and you understand, you know, what your big idea is, for example, in this project, and what are the patterns and what is the story you're there to tell, you always have to test it against the attributes. So it's either the language that I use, it's on brand or off brand. It's not about what you like and what you don't like. It's about what follows the attributes. And that's the job in front of you. Job in front of you is to follow your attributes, understand the patterns in your work, and have a rock solid relationship with the story that you're telling.
Well, ladies, thank you so much. It's been fantastic, and Marina, I hope you've found the process useful.
Extremely interesting, extremely useful for me. And I mean, I thank you very much for this opportunity to have this review in the positive, and as well the points are negative of this project, and I think I will evolve from this experience.
We hope so. We look forward to seeing that involvement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Seeing where you go with it, for sure. And best of luck with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.